Why does it matter that there's a marriage divide in America? What's kind of the big deal? Aren't families becoming just more diverse today in 2019? Well, it's a big deal actually because in part kids are more likely to flourish when they're raised in intact married families compared to the alternative. Now, I'm sort of saying this to you as someone who was raised by a single mother. I think my mom did a pretty good job with me and with my sister. We're both actually happily married. We've got a lot of kids between the two of us. I think probably there's, 35 years of marriage between the two of us. So, we're kind of doing fine. But as a sociologist, it's important to acknowledge, to recognize that family instability is a risk factor for kids on a variety of fronts. And these next couple of slides give you a sense of some of those risks for kids. So when it comes to economics, for instance, we know that kids who are being raised in single mother households, single father households, in the center on the right of this slide, are much more likely to experience poverty than kids being raised in married families. So again, there's kind of an economic story here. When it comes to incarceration, we can see here is that boys who don't have a father in the household are much more likely to sort of succumb to the call of the street, to fall in with boys who don't, have the best relationship with the law. So again, if you're being raised by a single mother, you're about twice as likely to end up in prison or in jail, at least at one point in your life, before you turn 30, compared to boys who are being raised in an intact married household with their dads in the picture. And this story here is controlling for a lot of things, including parental education, income, race, and ethnicity. But sort of dads matter, family structure matters for daughters as well. What we can see here is that girls who are being raised without their dads in the picture are more likely to become pregnant as a teenager. Again, not to have his attention, not to have him sort of monitoring the boys in their milieu. Most importantly, not to sort of, getting his affection. A colleague of mine sort of looked at a lot of these factors, and he found that when he controlled for kind of the quality of the relationship between the father and the daughter, that was really the best predictor of teenage pregnancy for girls here in America. So again, these are kind of just some of the factors that help to explain a PowerPoint slide like the one up here. And then when it comes to school, obviously school is a important part of getting the human capital that you need to sort of thrive in this competitive economy we have here in 21st century America. But it's hard to get the schooling that you need if you're getting into trouble at school. And what this work by my colleague Nicholas Zill suggests to us is that kids who are in non-intact families are much more likely to be getting into trouble at school, to have their parents contacted by a principal or a vice principal or a teacher. And so we can see here again that, that family structure is linked to some important outcomes for kids, and that kids in a variety of non-intact families are more likely to be running into trouble on the school front. And as they kind of move towards college, you can see here that kids from both more privileged homes on the right and kids from less privileged homes on the left are more likely to graduate from college if they've got an intact family sort of standing behind them and helping to pay for tuition, but also kind of giving them emotional support, both kind of before and after they've entered college as well. And then finally, in terms of just kind of the child outcomes, we can see that the patterns of mobility are different for kids from intact families versus divorced families. And so what you can see here basically is that if you're coming from a continuously married family on the left, and you're coming from the bottom third of income distribution here, I'll just jump down to show this to you more clearly. So let's say you're growing up poor here, okay, and your parents are stably married. You've got a 50% shot of making it to the middle or the upper class, as an adult. By contrast, if you're coming, from the poorest homes and your parents get divorced, you've only basically a 26% shot of making it into the middle class or the upper class. And this story also plays actually for rich kids as well. So there was an article written by Matthew Iglesias, who was at that point a columnist for Slate, talking about David Brooks's divorce. Unfortunately, David Brooks got divorced. He was sort of just kind of making some snide comments about this because Brooks had written about the importance of family stability for America. And what he said was, well, Brooks's kids will be just fine because Brooks is a rich and prominent man in American life. And based upon his own experience growing up in Manhattan, there are plenty of kids who grew up in kind of rich, unstable family homes who kind of turned out fine. Now, of course, what's interesting about this is that normally Iglesias actually relies upon stats and numbers to sort of make his arguments. But in this particular article for Slate, there were no numbers. It was just all anecdotal from his perspective. But if you look carefully at these two columns here and here, you can see that Iglesias was wrong. Because what this is showing us is that even rich kids are affected, it looks like, by the family stability that they're experiencing. So what this is showing us basically is that a clear majority of kids who are raised in intact, married, wealthy families are wealthy as adults, right here. Whereas only 37% of them are wealthy as adults if they grew up rich, but their parents got divorced. So my point here simply is that there's a link between kind of family stability here and where kids end up economically and financially as adults, kind of later on in life. Or the bottom line is that kids who are raised in intact married homes are significantly more likely to realize the American dream, economically at least, and to steer clear of poverty.